Sound check, 1, 2, 3. Sound test.
Okay. Good morning, everyone. Bonjour tout le monde. We're going to start in 1 minute. We'll start in 1 minute. Thank you. Merci. Bonjour à tous et à toutes. Good morning, everyone. As we begin our meeting today, on behalf of Ottawa City Council, I wish to acknowledge that Ottawa is built on unceded Anishinaabe Algonquin territory. The peoples of the Anishinaabe Algonquin Nation have lived on this territory for millennia. Their culture and presence have nurtured and continue to nurture this land. The City of Ottawa honors the peoples and land of the Anishinaabe Algonquin Nation and honors all First Nations, Inuit, and Métis peoples and their valuable past and present contributions to this land. I'll ask the committee coordinator now to do the roll call, please.
Councillor Luloff.
Good morning.
Councillor Dudas.
Present.
Councillor Curry.
Here.
Councillor Gower. Councillor Tierney.
Present.
Councillor King.
Here.
Councillor Leeper.
Here.
Councillor Brockington.
Here.
Councillor Menard.
Here.
Councillor Brown.
Here.
Vice Chair Kitts.
Here.
Mayor Sutcliffe.
Here.
You have quorum, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you very much. Are there any declarations of interest? Confirmation of minutes from the meeting of February 4th. Are those carried? Regarding item 4.1, I understand that Conseillère Plante and the Integrity Commissioner have spoken, and Conseillère Plante does not intend to pursue this matter further. So the Integrity Commissioner confirms that an alleged victim is not required to speak with her as part of the intake process, as set out in the motion. So with that in mind, and with the will of committee, I'm recommending that we receive the referral motion and take no further action on the matter. Received? Okay. Item 5.1 has a presentation, so we'll hold that. 5.2 is the 2024 Statement of Remuneration, Benefits, and Expenses paid to members of council and council appointees. There is a technical amendment for that, but we can deal with that quickly if everybody's okay with that. Vice Chair Kitts?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Whereas document 2 was circulated with the agenda package, however, the remuneration and expenses paid to the members of the Ottawa Investment Board were omitted. Therefore, be it resolved that Finance and Corporate Services Committee approve the revised document 2 for consideration by the committee at today's meeting.
Is that carried? And then the item is amended. Is that received? Item 5.3 is the report on the 2025 budget expenses pursuant to Ontario Regulation 28409. Is that carried? Item 6.1 is the comprehensive legal services report for the period July 1st to December 31st. Is that received? Hold. Okay. Item 7.1 is the application for approval to expropriate lands for the baseline transit priority phase. Is that carried? Okay, we will move back to item 5.1, which is the presentation on the ITS work plan update. Go ahead whenever you're ready.
Morning, Mr. Mayor, members of committee. So I'm just going to be really quick this morning because then I'm going to pass over to both Sandra and Jason, both of which you've met before. Oh, sorry.
I have a motion to allow staff to do the presentation.
Right.
Be it resolved that the Finance and Corporate Services Committee approve that the rules of procedure be waived subject to subsection 83(4)A of the procedure bylaw to receive a staff presentation on the ITS work plan update.
Is that carried? Thank you, Vice Chair Kitts, for your diligence.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and thank you, Councillor Kitts, for allowing me to speak this morning. So again, we're back as our commitment to come back to committee and council on a regular basis. So this time of year is where we like to bring forward a little bit of a overview of our past 2024 successes in IT, and then give a little bit of a preview of our focus in terms of the top items that we're working on from an IT perspective in the organization. Again, it's not an all-encompassing list. What you'll see today is basically the bigger ticket items, if you will, in terms of the bigger projects. We have literally hundreds of projects that we work on year-round. So what you'll see today is a little bit more of the strategic higher level programs and projects that the IT team is supporting across the organization. So with that, I'll pass over to Sandra and Jason, who will walk you through the presentation.
Thank you, Cyril. Good morning, Chair and committee members. I'm pleased to be here to present an update on some of the work underway for information technology services this year. Bonjour aux présidentes et aux membres du comité. Je suis heureux d'être ici pour présenter une mise au jour de certains de travail en cours pour les services de technologie de l'information cette année. Today, Jason and I will be providing a high-level overview of some of the accomplishments for 2024, the current insights into our work for 2025, information on how we're collaborating with the CISO office on cybersecurity and the different roles that we're taking on, the steps we're taking towards enabling increment innovation across the city. We'll also talk a little bit about artificial intelligence, how it plays in our work, and how we're enhancing stance on data. Next slide, please. ITS partners with the city's many different lines of business to provide innovative and cost-effective technology solutions to support the delivery of municipal services to Ottawa residents. We provide digital leadership for the city by proactively supporting departments to achieve their business priorities through innovative technology, while we consider all the legal, all the cybersecurity, all the statutory, and all the record-keeping obligations. Next slide, please. Our strategic priorities direct most of our work we do outside of our routine operations. Overall, it's IT's goal to achieve digital excellence within our organization by providing a consistent, secure, modern, and innovative technology environment. Nous visons à atteindre l'excellence numérique au sein de notre organisation en fournissant un environnement technologique courant, sécurisé, moderne et innovant. Everything that we do drives towards these three pillars: secure city, digital modernization, enterprise technology, and data. Secure City focuses on strengthening the city's technology posture. We're committed to making sure that technology used to deliver services to our residents is secure and is reliable. The findings from the 2023 cybersecurity audit have driven several of our key projects under this pillar. The digital modernization focus area is all about making sure that our city infrastructure and applications are up to date and continue to meet the needs of our partners. One of the key focuses in this area is around reducing the number of legacy applications in our inventory, and many of our key projects for 2025 fall under this umbrella. And our third pillar, enterprise technology and data, is our final grouping. This is all about evaluating how emerging technology and data can enhance our services. Next slide, please. I'd just like to provide a little bit of a summary of 2024. Most of our time continues to be spent on keeping the lights on. It's our regular day-to-day operations. In 2024, we had 142,000 service requests and 17,000 in-person appointments. In terms of our project work, we finished 108 projects that had 2024 due dates. And I want to highlight a couple of these projects in particular. The cybersecurity audit. An audit was conducted in late 2023 that highlighted several areas that the city could strengthen its resistance to cyber attack. This is an extremely important work that we do. It is a component of our business that is constantly evolving and requires us to continuously strengthen the level of the city's security posture and mitigate risk associated with the exposure to the ever-changing landscape. In 2024, we addressed the audit recommendations while incorporating them into our cybersecurity program. The lag and replacement. In 2024, we successfully replaced the city's Age 311 system with a new multifunction tool that has room to grow. The deployment was extremely successful, and we're now working on the next few enhancements that will allow our agents to provide even better services to our residents. The LMS Go Live. The Land Management Solution Project is a multi-phase, innovative set to modernize and replace the 20-year-old map legacy technology. In 2024, the team completed Release 1 and successfully migrated building code services to the new digital solution. The system provides a quick, user-friendly experience to book inspections, upload documents, and make payments online using any device. Work has begun in 2025 to expand the use of the system to planning services, right-of-way, heritage and urban design services, and committee of adjustment. As well, in 2024, the council AV equipment. Over the summer of 2024, Andrew Haydon Chambers underwent a significant technical retrofit, replacing the aged council AV system, which was beyond end of life. This joint effort between ITS, the Office of the City Clerk, and Facility Services provides better integration with virtual conferencing, equipment, new cameras, and interactive systems, and lays the groundwork for future potential upgrades and functionality. And another project I want to highlight is the responsible use of Gen AI guideline. While we await legislative directions from the federal level, we developed a set of responsible use guidelines to educate city employees in making informed decisions when using Gen AI tools to support their work. This guide, developed in collaboration with 60 internal and external partners, identifies challenges, the risks, the guiding principles, and the potential use cases for this prominent technology. Next slide, please. So I'd like to look a little forward into 2025. We currently have 114 projects planned or underway for 2025, including a few multi-year projects that you may recognize. I want to speak to a few of these to give you an idea of what we have underway. The SAP modernization. We're ramping up work in this area quite substantially. One initiative overseen by our colleagues in corporate finance will see us move to a new version of SAP within the next 2 years, future-proofing one of the most important enterprise applications. The Service 311 enhancements. We will continue enhancing our 311 system with more options and ways for residents to be made aware of status of their requests. We're also looking to add new service operating and ways to self-serve. Like the SAP modernization program, this is a continued multi-year initiative with the goal of improving our client service experience. We also have legacy application strategy. We've been making a conscious effort to reduce the number of legacy applications at the system. We've developed a strategy guiding how we're approaching the elimination of those applications and our approach to future legacy technology. This is the guiding much of our work for 2025. And the cyber program enhancements. In close partnership with the CISO office, we will continue to bolster our cyber programs, putting in place policy, measures, and training to protect city resources. We will also continue to roll out data loss prevention measures and strategies to combat bad actors. Next slide, please. Also want to kind of give you an update as well on cybersecurity. ITS and the Office of the CISO continue to work very closely in the cybersecurity space. And so you look over here, you can see the roles and responsibilities for the Office of the CISO, as well as those for ITS. So with regards to the CISO, they are going to develop and implement the organization's cybersecurity strategy and roadmap, which will dictate a lot of the work that we do in ITS. They establish and enforce enterprise-wide security policy, directives, and guidelines. They look at the risk management. They manage the digital risk at the City of Ottawa. And with regards to security awareness, they promote a security culture and awareness across the organization. Within ITS, we're going to ensure that the security of our cloud and infrastructure and applications are up to date. We look at managing the network, the parameter, and the endpoint security of all of our tools. With regards to data protection, we implement data loss prevention measures and security configurations. With threat and vulnerability management, we're going to review the threat intelligence, the vulnerability management, and continuous security monitoring. And then with regards to incident response, working with the Office of the CISO handles security incidents and digital forensics. I'd like to now turn it over to Jason so he can continue our presentation.
Next slide, please. As Sandra mentioned, we're focusing on enabling self-serve and on-demand tools within the organization. Not only does this take the pressure off ITS resources and allow us to focus on more complex initiatives, but it empowers staff to innovate within their services using existing low-cost tools. For instance, many tools in automation, AI, and data are already available to staff. In particular, the Microsoft Power Platform, which includes the ability to create automated flows, simple custom apps, perform complex data analysis, and much more. We already offer self-serve on how to leverage these tools, and we're going to build on what exists to meet staff at the level they're at. These are just a few examples of what staff can already do on their own with a bit of support. We have an ongoing education campaign called Tech Bites to bring awareness to the resources at staff's disposal. These have included sessions on Power Automate Flows, Power BI, artificial intelligence, and Copilot for the web. This program gives staff the tools and training they need to make incremental improvements to their service with minimal waiting time. Next slide, please. The city continues to explore use cases for integrating AI into day-to-day work. La ville continue d'explorer des cas d'utilisation pour l'intégrer l'IA dans le travail quotidien. ITS has deployed hundreds of automation flows and business flows for city departments, reducing administrative workload and enabling staff to focus on higher value tasks. To ensure AI is being delivered consistently and appropriately, IT works with our partners to ensure best practices are followed. We've been placing a large focus on education campaigns and testing proofs of concept to ensure solutions meet expectations. You can see on the screen just some of the education and governance initiatives that we've completed recently. We've also listed out a few current and future projects designed to investigate how we can leverage AI tools into our work lives with the ultimate goal of improving services to our residents. For example, we're testing out virtual agents like the one currently in use by 311. The one in use leverages AI to enhance agent support through real-time assistance during calls and delivers real-time suggestions, relevant knowledge base articles, and customer history drawn from the system, as well as recommendations on the type of service requests that need to be submitted. We're also enabling other city departments to use AI for survey analysis. For example, for the water review survey, AI was used on the 30,000 submissions to provide insights, themes, and summaries. Personally identifiable information was removed, then the text was processed and analyzed. The results are then loaded into a dashboard, enabling staff to visualize and consume the data. We've produced a number of similar products like this. We're also working with some of our city partners to see how AI-assisted image analysis can be used for things like pothole detection and street sign analysis. Opportunities like this will help optimize how we deliver those real, tangible outcomes. I also want to be clear, there will always need to be human intervention when making decisions, particularly ones that impact people. It's about human intelligence supported by artificial intelligence. At no point should any AI tool be making official business decisions without oversight by a person with authority. We make this clear on our revised responsible computing policy, which will be released soon. Next slide, please. One of our focuses of late has been on data and how we can use the wealth of information we have at our disposal to better our services. We've been working with Bloomberg as well as engaging with other municipalities to share data best practices and put in place a strategy to move us forward in this field. Our goals are to create clear governance around city data assets, to put in place resources to upskill our people around data practices, and to ensure that all decisions are data informed. While this will be a multi-year initiative, we've taken great strides recently in working towards these goals. Here are just some of the key projects that we have underway to achieve that end. The city data strategy, which is led by the city manager's office, will outline governance, standards, technology, and learning resources on data practices across the city. The resident impact data project, which supports the creation of a publicly available dashboard on the economic development strategy that provides the business community with a one-stop shop for information on the local economy with a focus on downtown recovery and revitalization. We're also leveraging data in the cybersecurity world to protect city data and help us make informed decisions. We've been working with revenue services to enhance the reporting, making it easier to answer questions around programs and budget. And finally, a data hub and catalog initiative is underway to support foundational technology to support enterprise data sharing across the organization. Thank you.
So this concludes our presentation, Mr. Chair. As you can see, ITS team is working hard, ensuring that the city can continue delivering services for our residents. I greatly appreciate the opportunity to highlight my team that is so often behind the scenes, but essential to our organization. Thank you for your time.
Thank you very much for the presentation. I have a couple of questions that were written by ChatGPT. Councillor Curry.
Exactly. So first of all, I just wanted to say thank you very much. I want to say that your IT services department are rock stars. I mean, every time we call, they show up within like 2 seconds. And we always have, seems the councillors have a lot of issues, and they are amazing. And I really appreciate that, how quickly they respond and how knowledgeable they are whenever we have a problem. So I wanted to say that first and foremost. I also want to thank you very much, Sandro, and your staff for the meeting that we had where you wanted our feedback. You know, what can we do better? What do you need help with? I'm hopeful that that was helpful to you, because it was certainly helpful to me. The other thing I wanted to say to councillors, and also again thanks to you, is that as was mentioned, the survey that went out asking the community, for our term of council priorities, right? We asked very specifically, what suggestions does the community have for housing? What suggestions they have for economic development? The results that came back and then came to the group, we have the program and services review, the AI generated response and insight into the responses from the community. Remember, people respond with long paragraphs of all kinds of things, but the help condensing that and picking up the themes was very, very helpful to us as a committee. So I really appreciate that. The other thing I was going to say is I'm so glad to hear you're working with Bloomberg on this. I mean, the economic development work that we are also working with Bloomberg on has been, extremely helpful. They are looking at cities all over the world in terms of what other cities are doing. So I just love that we're also getting insight into what cities all around the world are doing. So the last thing I just have is a question. So at audit committee, the Auditor General will do an audit. And in the last many, one of the challenges has been that the Auditor General has trouble getting the data from the departments, right? And the departments are always apologetic and saying, you know, our systems are not great. Am I hearing that, you know, basically we were not going to get that response from staff anymore? Because it seems, you know, look at building code services, they're saying our new system is going to solve all the problems that we've had. You know, I think OC Transpo's response was similar. I can think of a few others at Audit Committee. So I'm wondering if you are following those challenges that the Auditor General puts forward and you're seeing the solutions to that based on those audits.
Mr. Chair, so I'll take a first stab, and then Sandra and Jason can kind of top me off if needed. But that's what we're seeing is and one of the things Sandra touched on there was looking at our legacy applications. So again, we are a very broad organization with hundreds of applications. So whenever we get to that point where we're doing a life cycle, if you will, like LMS, SAP that Sandra mentioned, these are opportunities where we now can leverage to, I don't like using the word modernize, but I don't know what other word to use, kind of get back on track in terms of amalgamating those systems down and leveraging the core system. So that is all part of the data strategy as well that Sandra and Jason talked about. As we life cycle legacy systems and new ones, the data strategy is part and part of that process, which will improve our access to data, readiness for data, and then leveraging that data to make more informed decisions. That's all part of the bundle that we're working towards.
Just as a final comment, Mr. Mayor, so when we see these improvements, right, you can see how the Auditor General will then be able to get information faster. The audits will be able to take place faster, because that's one of the challenges. She's waiting for information because it's more difficult to get. And then when she gets it, she maybe doesn't have all the right information. So I'm just so thrilled with this, and I'm always looking forward to this presentation, and today is no exception. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Curry. Councillor Leeper.
Thank you very much, Mayor. And thank you very much for the presentation, guys. It's a very forward-looking IT department, and I think we can be very proud of it here at the city. I did have a question. A few years ago, there was a recognition that we really wanted to focus on upskilling our own staff versus hiring consultants to do a lot of the work. We had a lot of network specialists, people whose job it was to keep the lights on, as you put it. But, you know, when it came to things like developing apps and some of those more sophisticated tasks, we didn't have a lot of capacity here at the city. Can you give me some color as to how that is evolving? How is our IT workforce becoming more sophisticated and able to do more for us so we can reduce our reliance on consultants?
Thank you, Mr. Chair, for the question. We look at training our staff as an investment. So we want to invest in our people. And to your question with respect to some of the training that we've done, a lot of the projects right now, we are able to have the own internal expertise to manage a lot of the projects that we're doing as we're moving forward in some of the legacy applications with regards to some of the new systems we're putting in place with regards to like SAP, Dynamics, in the Microsoft. We're investing in our individuals. We're encouraging our staff to get certification. We're looking to invest in them so they could take courses. We provide opportunities working with their managers if work is available that they can take some training, and where we want to invest in that kind of training where we know by spending that kind of money will save us down the road by not being reliant on consultants. The other thing that we did was we converted some of our professional services to make it into FTEs. We've done that a couple of times back in 2016, and we did it again in 2022, where we realized that we have such good individuals, we didn't want to lose them. We didn't want to replace them with consultants because consultants will come in and then leave. We want to invest in our individuals. We want to see them have the opportunity to grow in ITS. So we've developed a lot of our own internal training. We have a mentorship program that we have within our own area where people can learn different skill sets. So there's a lot that we're doing. I think when I look at the skill sets that we have in those core applications that we have, we've got good individuals that can do the work that we don't really rely on consultants. And the area where we really have consultants is on these legacy systems because staff don't want to learn this technology that's irrelevant. So we need to use consultants. So that's why, as Cyril mentioned, as part of our legacy review, getting those systems off of our ecosystem, moving them into these legacy solutions, and then just leveraging on that great technology or that great skill set that we have internally is just going to help us moving forward tremendously.
Thank you very much. It's an encouraging answer, and I would encourage you to keep along that path. I know in the budget for the past, I would say probably few years, there's been sort of an extra investment in the IT department in order to help accomplish some of that, and I hope that this council will continue to move down that path. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Leeper. Councillor King.
Thank you so much, Your Worship. I just wanted to ask staff, how will artificial intelligence be utilized to bring automated workflows to Service Ottawa or 311 to really improve the city's responsiveness to residents?
Mr. Mayor, so I'll take that one, Senator, if you don't mind. That's going to be part of the work that the Agile working group will be taking part of. One of the areas there is 311. In the fall, leading into January, Michelle, I was able to attend some. Michelle Joannis is the Director of Service Ottawa. She met with each and every one of you to get some feedback. But that's part of the next step now as we kick off with the Agile Working Group, is really framing up the key areas. And that will be one of our area of focus, is leveraging AI where we can to support the 311.
I appreciate that. I appreciate the efforts. I know that with some of my councillor colleagues, last year we attended a conference with the Federation of Canadian Municipalities, and we heard about other municipalities highly leveraging AI to increase responsiveness to 311 requests for residents. I know that that's something that I hear on an ongoing basis, just really any effort that we can utilize to increase the efficiency of the processes and also responsiveness to 311 requests would be appreciated. So I'm really pleased that work continues on that front. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor King. Councillor Tierney.
Great. Thank you very much. It's going back in the memory machine 15 years ago. Before this, I was in the IT world for 15 years, and oddly enough, my first career was converting Canada Post from a spaghetti diagram into SAP formula. So ABAP certification, R3, blah, 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 a whole bunch of technical stuff. So it's great to see that we're moving ahead on that front. And like Councillor King mentioned, some of the other points related to workflow. I know there's some challenges with that from a union perspective. How are we able to make use of some of the powerful parts of the tools? AI is great to help reroute things, but there's still no assignment available. And I assume it's because of maybe it's too complex, or is it a union-related issue? This would help definitely create the efficiencies. And just for the puzzled stares I'm getting from a few of my colleagues, in a nutshell, I'm also a SharePoint expert as well. And a lot of the engines based on the back end will automatically, after so many days that you set the parameters, will kick it to a different department if there's no response, or a request that it advance to a manager. These are the tools that are naturally built in to the environment, but I know that there's some struggles around that. Are we able, or is there works or discussions on making use of the powerful part of the tool?
So Mr. Mayor, I'll touch on a couple things. I want to make sure I address your question. So from a 311, that's part of the thing that we're going to be looking at in terms of the service request process. That's we're going to look at that.
Yeah.
What we have today, like from our accounts payable perspective, our P card perspective, corporate card, we have built-in approval flows where that kind of same idea exists today, where depending on the delegated authority, if an invoice needs to be approved, it goes to the manager, then it goes to the next level. If that person doesn't respond within 48, 72 hours, then it gets elevated to myself, and then so on.
It's great for internal operations, and
exactly.
I can see where the union wouldn't care about that, but I'm looking for the public facing.
Exactly. So we're looking at that as part of the 311 review with the Agile Working Group that we're kicking off, is that exists today over in this process.
Yep.
How can we lift and shift it over into this process? So that's the stuff that we will be looking at as part of the enhancements moving forward for 311.
Okay, and that's great. I'm so happy. I know that Caitlin's very excited about a new 311 tool as well, and our new tools around the table. I've been watching the evolution. We've come a long way from a counselor going, how do I Google that? You may have replaced her in the day. But now we actually are very, I think, elevated as far as what we want to see from a technical perspective. But I do want to thank your team. You've done an excellent job. COVID was the first real test, and you guys were 5 stars. So thank you for that.
Thank you, Councillor Tierney. Councillor Brown.
Thank you very much, Mr. Mayor. And I think this is a very interesting topic. I don't think AI is going to replace anyone. I don't think Skynet or the Terminator are going to take over, but I certainly think there's an opportunity here to help leverage some of the workflows that we do. I know last week I created a PowerPoint presentation for a community association meeting using the Microsoft Copilot. So I thought it was pretty interesting, and I still had to feed in the information so it could design the PowerPoint for me, but it saved me quite a bit of time filling in that structure. In addition to 311 looking to take advantage of some of these generative AI tools, are there other priority groups that we're looking at across the corporation that we might trial some of the uses for AI?
Mr. Mayor, again, I don't mean to hog the mic today, but absolutely. So as Jason mentioned, a little bit of a campaign that we're doing where we're kind of soliciting all of the departments to come forward with those ideas. And what I can use as some tangible examples is in HR from a recruitment perspective. So when we go out and post a job posting as examples, sometimes we get 100+ resumes. So traditionally your HR staffing officer needs to screen through that. So what we're doing now is we're working with the HR team to basically leverage the AI tool to really refine the screen-in process, because there's a number of resumes that really wouldn't make the cut, to be frank. So as opposed to having someone go through every one by one, we're using that tool, much like Councillor Curry talked about in the service review, is getting it down to a more relevant list, if you will. So that will save a significant amount of time. So all these little things, whether I move over to my payroll department, where we do an abundance of QA on our payroll runs, we're meeting with the teams to really see where we can leverage AI to kind of reduce the volume of eyes on screen and really get back to that strategical thinking in terms of QA processes, et cetera. So across the organization where it exists, we have an open door policy with IT in terms of those, I'll call it low-hanging fruit, a lot of pain points that resolves a lot of issues. So we are doing that aggressively.
Perfect. Thank you very much. Well, I think this is going to be an area where we're going to receive a significant positive dividend for the time and investment we put into this. So looking forward to watching this grow and seeing how we can better leverage it. Because at the end of the day, it's about getting that product or that process to the end user as quickly and as efficiently as possible. And I think this is something that we can be a leader in, certainly in the city. And Councillor Curry often reminds council that there's a tech park somewhere in Ottawa. And so I think there's probably some good partners there that we could probably leverage for knowledge and information. But just I think this is great and looking forward to seeing the results. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Brown. Councillor Johnson.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So certainly, the 2025 priorities slide is pretty transformational. I mean, there are projects in each one of those columns that would truly make an enormous difference to people's quality of life as well as the functioning of the corporation. Are we able to have a sense of, I mean, I'm certain that not all will be completed in 2025. I think it would be hard to imagine. Do you have the timeframes for each one of those projects, an overview of those projects in your work plan over several years that councillors could see, or is that something we have to sort of understand from the budget when we see resources applied to those specific projects year over year?
Mr. Mayor, so maybe Sandra, you can top me up, but I think the approach that we've taken in the past number of years, especially on the bigger projects, and I'll use LMS as a first example, and it'd be the same process that we're kind of leveraging for SAP, is that phased approach. So we can't, because obviously we need to ensure that 24/7 operations continues. A lot of the staff that might be on one project could be the expertise and skills that we need on another. So we really broken it down into like kind of that phased approach. That's how we did it for LMS. That's continuing. If you look at SAP as an example, we've done a number of small bites and pieces. Now we're moving into a bigger plan where that will span over 2 or 3 years to really ensure that we can still run the day-to-day operations, but still enhance the project. Some projects are more robust than the other, but I think maybe what we can do is in our next update on this, probably when we come back from an IT perspective later in the fall, we can provide a little bit of a timeline in terms of where some of these large projects are in the life cycle of that project. Maybe that would be useful.
I would be interested in seeing that, certainly, because to have something like And also, we didn't have this in advance, right? There was a motion moved to have this presentation, so I apologize if there's more that I should know. But, you know, when we look at the emergency, I forget how you called it, but the public emergency notification system, certainly of interest even to a motion that we have on the floor today. Where are we in that project? I know that when we go to EPS, we're talking about that regularly. Do we have a beginning and an end to that so that we can sort of have some of our other plans? Similarly, the LMS, you know, in talking to Building Code with respect to their recent audit, a lot of future solutions can come through that plan. But ones that are impacting residents right now, I'd like to have a sense of, you know, when we might offer resolutions or new solutions to residents when we're dealing with them. So I would be interested in having a bit more of a chronological approach to that. That would be helpful. And could you also let me know what is the resident impact data project that was listed on that slide? What does that mean?
Councillor, that's the one I mentioned around economic development. So this is about providing that data to residents so they can see. We've historically provided that via PDF. So this is providing a more up-to-date version with real-time data. So that's what that resident impact data project's about.
Okay. I wonder if the name could meet. Maybe you could label it with something with a bit more.
That was actually something that was delivered through Bloomberg. So it was, you should deliver a resident impact data project. The project that we're delivering through that is for economic development.
Okay. All right. So just to, you know, to make some of those nuances visible in the presentation would be helpful because we're not privileged to those kinds of conversations. And then my final question, obviously, perhaps it's a bit dramatic, but certainly Microsoft as a suite stores their servers, their data in the United States. We're talking about procurement and Protect Ontario. I think data protection certainly is probably part of the conversation. Could I have a comment on whether or not we've been engaging with some of these projects with respect to some of the new relationships with our neighbors south of the border?
That's a great question. And as part of with the Microsoft, like there's a lot of our data, you know, Canada's part of the Five Eyes, and we do have it where working with Microsoft, some of our data is stored in data centers in Canada, right? So we know that they move the data around, but we're working with them where we want our data to be in Canada. So we're working with that. We do that with all of our vendors with regards to our data. It's not reserved or resident in Canada, there is an exemption for it. We go through that process, but that's one of our requirements when we look at our vendors to have that data center in Canada.
Tremendous. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Johnson. Thank you again for the presentation. So is that item received? All right, jumping ahead to item 6.1, the legal services report for July to December. Councillor Brockington, was it you that asked for it to be held? Go ahead.
Thank you, Mayor. Yes, I believe myself and Councillor Johnson. I just have a few questions for staff, if I may. Stemming from the report, Figure 1 provides data on labor arbitration outcomes. Could staff just elaborate on the types of labor arbitration that they're dealing with? Are these grievances, disciplinary matters? What are you immersed with?
Mr. Mayor, the specifics of the types of labor disputes obviously are not reflected in the report. I'm happy to provide members of council with more information offline, but generally they're workplace disputes, grievances regarding discipline, from anything from suspensions all the way up to terminations.
Okay, I appreciate that. I'm not ever will ask for the details of specific cases, but I do believe that the committee has a role to better understand if every single grievance was workplace harassment, that would send off an alarm bell. We would need to be aware of those types of things, but if it's multiple issues spread out, then I appreciate that. Figure 2 talks about total claims, personal injury versus property damage. Could you just elaborate on, again, the types of personal injury and the types of property damage claims?
Certainly, Mr. Mayor. The personal injury will vary from typically a slip and fall. So whether there's an injury to a broken bone, bruising, motor vehicle accidents where there may be personal injuries related. Property damage relates to, again, the majority as reflected in the report are typically pothole related claims to vehicles, but they also extend to property related claims such as foundation type claims, sewer related issues that are reflected in the type of claims that the city receives.
And could staff just talk to me about how general managers are made aware of claims? So again, if there's any type of trend that continuously repeats itself where we can help address this to avoid future claims, how is senior staff involved in these legal matters to address those types of things?
Mr. Mayor, the claims unit and the litigation units, when we're responding to claims, work closely with operational staff in the departments, obviously to make staff aware of the types of claims that are coming in, and then supporting individual claims from a documentary perspective. And then through the resolution process, whether it's at the claims level or at the litigated level, staff work closely with the operational departments to develop a strategy on dealing with a particular claim, but also if there's more general trends that are being demonstrated, we will work with senior leadership to respond accordingly to those types of matters, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. My last question stems from Table 1, claims over 100,000. Transit Services had some bodily personal injury claims, about $6 million in total, multiple claims. Are these stemming from sort of high profile past incidents, or are these all unique from each other, all one-offs? What can you share with the committee this morning?
Mr. Mayor, these are generally relating to motor vehicle accidents. And as you can appreciate, Transit Services operating the fleet of vehicles that they do. And they simply reflect the complexity of injuries that flow from any motor vehicle accident in our society today, with the attendant care costs that are required, and other compensation required through the process of law. So generally speaking, nothing any high profile in the sense that this is the reality of motor vehicle injuries and litigated matters in Ontario currently.
Okay, I appreciate the information. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Brockington. Councillor Johnson.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So there's two ways that I'm very interested in the city's legal department. One is certainly related to road safety and whether or not we are investing enough in our road safety plans and projects to offset whatever litigation can come our way related to road safety accidents. So that's one that I continue to speak with the city solicitor about offline. But for today, I'm also interested certainly in how our legal department can work as efficiently as possible in order to get housing built. Because, you know, we are often discussing how the city does not hold water for all of the reasons why housing is not getting built, but I would argue that certainly an efficient legal service that offers development applications, an expedited process, or a timely response to get housing built is one of the things that I hope we can have in our control here at City Council. So I have some questions related to that. So one of the things is the program that was instated. Now you would have to remind me whether it was 2023 or 2024 to engage BLG in the expedited development application review process. So I was wondering if you could comment on some of the numbers that we're seeing in this report, how that expedited process has been performing in your view, whether it's been achieving the results that the investment has called for in getting development applications through.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Mayor. So again, as the councillor's question points out, there's been an unprecedented demand on all elements of the municipality regarding housing and the various legislation that the province has enacted, and obviously to fulfill those obligations and those goals. Legal Services has worked with trying to innovate and trying to advance the various development agreements that are required by law and obviously are required to implement housing solutions and options. And so one of the innovative mechanisms that we've implemented was, as the councillor alluded to, was a program with an external law partner to deal with an option for developers to pursue a private firm, Borden Ladder Gervais, for development agreements coming out of the Committee of Adjustment, so severances, consents, etc. And that program was implemented last year in 2024, and we're continuing that in 2025 with some modifications that we're still addressing. We're going to be evaluating that program throughout the course of 2025, and certainly happy to share those results with members of committee and council. Generally speaking, it is serving certainly a need to get agreements out and providing that option to ensure that these types of agreements don't lapse. And that's the concern, is that there's a statutory timeline for agreements to be dealt with, and it requires all parties, frankly, to participate in that process to make sure that whatever is required is provided so that these agreements can be registered in a timely manner.
Thank you. So, what I hear from residents is that, certainly when the documentation goes to the outside firm, that part, it happens quickly. But sometimes the offboarding to that private firm and then the onboarding back to the City of Ottawa and whatever is needed after the fact to actually get the resolution that residents need in order to advance still exceeds the 30 days that the program is intended to address. So my concern remains that when residents are engaging in what is to be a 30-day expedited process, that they still actually exceed 30 days and they feel that $3,000 doesn't solve the problem that they are after. And I'm concerned that it is still in the city's hands, that we're not moving that forward quickly enough. So could you please comment as to whether or not you have the resources required to advance around that expedited process so that those residents who are paying an additional $3,000 are getting the resolution that they are seeking?
Mr. Mayor, that's certainly an item of discussion we have frequently with our external partners, and partly it is trying to find those improvements both internal to the city and external with our external partners, but also it's also a communication process, making sure that all stakeholders understand what the program is, and making sure that that information is relayed so that it's managing expectations. But I'll certainly take that away, and I meet very shortly actually with our external partners on this matter and others, and trying to improve those enhancements so that we have a true picture by the end of 2025 of where the opportunities are and certainly where the challenges lay.
That would be great, because certainly when we're contracting an external firm to do some of the work, I want to know that we are getting the value for money that we are offering them, but that also residents are seeing the resolution that they are paying for. So I'd like to certainly hear a follow-up on that. And similarly or different, your report shows the number of claims that you received in the last 2 quarters and the ones that were discharged in the last 2 quarters. Can you let us know how many are in the pipeline at any given time in the claims that you're experiencing?
It does vary over time, Mr. Mayor. I can advise that currently we have 1,078 open claims. Of that, 540 are litigated, so those are before the court, so they're assigned to legal counsel, and 538 non-litigated claims. So those would include the property and the personal injury type claims that I mentioned earlier.
So with those numbers, not being a person in legal myself, is that, do you believe that's a reasonable number of claims to have? Does the time weighted by anyone who's filing a claim, has that time grown or shrunk over the last 5 years, let's say?
It is a significant number. It varies based on seasonal demands, such as we're going through what would be the spring thaw, and so we're going to pothole season, and it varies. The time expectations vary. So, for example, a pothole claim is on average about 2.5 months to be resolved from the intake to disposition, whereas another type of claim, such as a personal injury claim, as you'll appreciate, requires more investigation, more documentation, medicals, liability reviews. And so that's on average 9 months. But certainly, yes, some claims will take longer, just given the interplay of the legal issues involved.
So similarly, do you feel that you have the resources in the claims department to be able to process those claims in a timely manner, or are the times that people are experiencing exceeding what you're comfortable with? I would argue that for some, it certainly is exceeding what residents are comfortable with.
And that's something that I will take back to my team. We are constantly looking at that. We have a very talented team of professional claims investigators who have a high carriage of files. And so where we can find efficiencies within our existing procedures, we'll certainly look at that and discuss that with others within the corporation and certainly report back to committee and council. But I take your point. Certainly I'm aware of claim processes and litigated matters as well. We have an obligation of matters that are before the courts that are somewhat outstanding. And so obviously in the interest of justice to have those claims assessed as efficiently as possible.
Okay, very good. What it reminds me of is when Bill 109 passed, we saw the planning department do a restructuring whereby they had, junior planners sitting under the leadership of a senior planner to try and expedite some of those simpler files. Have you done any kind of restructuring within your department in a similar vein to try and get for lack of a better word, some kind of express line through for those that might be a little more rote in their nature?
Yes, Mr. Mayor, we have within the claims unit, we have obviously the different levels of files. So the property type pothole claims are dealt with differently than a personal injury or more complex property foundation claim. So they're assigned to different investigators with different skill sets and different abilities to get claims adjusted more rapidly.
And if someone was to go on maternity leave or have an extended illness, that would be readily taken up by somebody else. It wouldn't just sit there on someone's desk.
Those type of issues will be addressed proactively so that claims are reassigned to staff that can take on that portfolio. Yes, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you very much, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Johnson. Councillor Brown?
Thank you very much, Mr. Mayor, and I appreciate the questions that Councillor Johnson had. With regards to some of the smaller severance applications that take place in the rural area, I know some landowners have indicated that they feel like they have no choice but to pay for the private firm to review the legal documentation pertaining to their severance, and that process happens quite quickly. But they say when that documentation is then sent back to the city for that final review, that's where it sits and it gets stalled. And one of the complaints that I have heard is that, I paid the extra money or I paid the few $1,000s to get this expedited out of the city's hands, and then it has to sit there and it's waiting. I did speak with a few different legal firms in rural Ottawa that do, I would say, a pile of work for many of these landowners, both within the city of Ottawa and externally in other municipalities. And they've indicated to me that the process that the city's legal department undergoes for some of these routine and straightforward severances is far beyond what is required. And you don't have to look any further than the village of Ashton. Half of it is in the city of Ottawa. The other half is in the township of Beckwith. You can get a severance over there in under a month. Whereas in the city side, we've got some applicants who have indicated they've been waiting 2 years. So when we're looking at moving some of these more routine, smaller files forward, Mr. Huxley, how are we ensuring that they are being expedited? And when that information and those documents come back to the City of Ottawa for the final review, it isn't sitting there again for several weeks or months?
Mr. Mayor, thank you for the question. These types of comments remain a top priority for myself and my legal services management team. And we are aware of some of the comments that members of council have experienced and conveyed through their residents. And we will obviously continue to work with our external partners at BLG to see where improvements can be made, and also the improvements internally. So I take that as a takeaway, and your comments are certainly landing well with me, and to see where those improvements can be made.
Thank you very much. And certainly I can appreciate all the work you and your staff are doing. And my last question, Mr. Mayor, for some of these very small routine severance applications or other similar ones in nature, is it possible to develop a process where these files go to the external legal counsel as a matter of course to clear the deck, as it were, so your staff can look at some of the more complex files and all of that work takes place outside the city, and then it just simply comes back at the end of the legal process for a quick review to ensure all the T's are crossed and I's are dotted? Would that help expedite some of that processing work?
Mr. Mayor, that's an option that we're exploring, and obviously subject to any issues that we may have internally or via statute. Those are the types of things we're exploring currently.
Thank you very much, Mr. Mayor.
Okay, is there a motion that you're?
Yeah, Mr. Mayor,
Attorney?
one of my colleagues that doesn't sit on this committee does have some direction.
Thank you. I was hoping, Mr. Huxley, that you would accept it as direction to report back to this committee on the expedited process and what you've been able to offer as improvements on the city's end for that, please.
And I'll move that.
Certainly, Mr. Mayor, that's agreeable.
Okay, so that's a direction. Thank you. Okay, so is the item received? All right, there are no in-camera items. I'll note the information previously distributed, motions of which notice has previously been given. Councillor Dudas, I believe you have an update to your motion. Would you like to introduce that now?
Yes, I can update that now. I'll read it in. Whereas the City of Ottawa maintains the core values of transparency, impartiality, respect, and accountability. Whereas the City of Ottawa maintains a dedicated City of Ottawa X account, as well as departmental accounts for traffic, OC Transpo, paramedic, fire services, bylaw, and regulatory services. Whereas the parent company X Corp purchased the platform formerly known as Twitter in 2022. Whereas the company X Corp, the owner, and their platform X have clearly demonstrated that they no longer possess or respect these values. Whereas the City of Ottawa and associated departments currently maintains active accounts on X. Whereas other social media platforms have emerged as viable alternatives. And whereas numerous other Canadian municipalities have suspended their X accounts and shifted their public communications to these alternative platforms. Whereas some City of Ottawa accounts, such as OC Transpo and traffic alerts, may require additional time and resources to transition off of this platform. Therefore, it be resolved that the City of Ottawa, as well as associated City of Ottawa departments, create a plan to suspend posting on all associated X holding platforms and migrate to alternative platforms. And be it further resolved that the City of Ottawa and associated City of Ottawa departments retain their accounts on X for the sole purpose of communicating with residents when there is a risk to public safety, public health and safety, or crisis or urgent situations that can have significant public impact. Be it further resolved that prior to the suspension, the City of Ottawa post on X informing residents of the intent to suspend its accounts and redirect residents to other platforms through which they can engage and receive updates from the City of Ottawa. And be it further resolved that as alternative platforms are investigated, City staff also consider Made in Ottawa communication solutions from residents in Ottawa's technology sector.
Did you want to speak to it at all, or just?
I believe we have delegations.
We have a couple of delegations.
And what I would suggest is I'm happy to wrap up.
Okay.
Or maybe ask some questions during.
Okay. We have 2 delegations and 2 written submissions. So Kevin O'Donnell, I believe he's online.
Yes. Hello.
Mr. O'Donnell, go ahead whenever you're ready.
Thank you. So thank you, Councillor Dudas, for putting this motion forward, as it has afforded me the opportunity to speak to this committee and through it, City Council in its entirety. I hope that it is obvious that this motion should pass unanimously and without any debate required. I considered not delegating today at all, figuring there was no need because the merits of the motion and the urgent need to adopt it was self-evident. However, I am delegating today because I'm scared and fearful that there's a chance the motion will not be adopted. I'm scared that a majority of this committee may vote against it. on some seemingly plausible reasoning. Years ago, Twitter was a normal place in terms of social media platforms. Imperfect, of course, but at least average in terms of hateful expressions and the encouragement of fascism, Nazism, and everything that is wrong with the world right now. However, the day Elon Musk bought it, it immediately turned into a Nazi social club. Why? Because Elon Musk is a Nazi. Now, I'm going to retell a story that explains why you must support this motion. It's a story about a bartender, originally by author Michael Tager, or Tager. Apologies, I don't quite know how to pronounce his name. In his own words, while Tager was enjoying an after-work beer, they noticed a bartender booting out a seemingly quiet patron. This patron was wearing a jacket covered in Nazi symbolism. When Tager asked about why they booted out the guy, because of course it's a guy, the bartender, a seasoned pro, said that if you let one Nazi in, slowly, they replace the clientele. You have to nip it in the bud immediately, they said, as Tager paraphrased. These guys come in, and it's always a nice one, a polite one, and you serve them because you don't want to cause a scene. And then they become a regular, and after a while, they bring a friend. And that dude is cool too. And then they bring friends, and the friends bring friends, and they stop being cool, and then you realize, oh, bleep, this is a Nazi bar now, he continued. And it's too late because they're entrenched, and if you try to kick them out now, they cause a problem, so you have to shut them down. Now, to build on that story, today, right now, X is the Nazi bar from that story. Elon Musk is the bartender. And the bar regulars are on X tweeting Nazi beliefs all day long. And then here comes the City of Ottawa's social media team with a message that the winter weather parking ban has been lifted. That's from March 1st. They're forced to walk into a Nazi bar, sit in the corner, hopefully avoiding the eager regulars to send a tweet in the hopes that it reaches other patrons who might need to know that the winter parking ban has been lifted. In every way, this makes the City of Ottawa complicit in supporting a Nazi platform. By being present on X, by sitting at the Nazi bar, you diminish the danger present in such places. You normalize it. You make it seem okay. You have to leave the bar. The question before this committee is simply this. Do you want to walk into a Nazi social club and send some tweets? Do you want to sit at the Nazi bar? Or is that disgusting to you on the very merits of sitting at a Nazi bar? We'll find out today in this meeting who among the members of this committee is comfortable sitting at the Nazi Twitter bar. We'll also find out who the real democratic leaders are today. We'll find out who's willing to lead and defend our democracy, who's willing to stand up and walk out. There's an urgency here, and from that, a need for me to be blunt. If you support this motion, you're a leader, and I thank you. You support human rights. You support decency and equality. You support a safe place for everyone to exist. You're defending every resident of the City of Ottawa from hate. Thank you. However, if you vote against this motion, you are the opposite. Being blunt, you're at best a Nazi sympathizer. You're someone who's comfortable walking into the X bar, the Nazi social club, sitting down to other Nazis, ordering a beer, and firing off some tweets. You look at the bartender in the eye, see him for what he is, and you stay. You're a collaborator at best, and an eager bar patron at worst. I will now end my delegation with my own roll call. The chair, Mayor Mark Sutcliffe, Councillor Kathy Curie, Councillor Glenn Gower, Councillor Jeff Lieber, Councillor Laura Dudas, Councillor Mark Luloff, Councillor Ralston King, Councillor Riley Brockington, Councillor Sean Menard, Councillor Tim Tierney, Vice Chair Councillor Catherine Kitts, and Councillor David Brown. You must vote in support of this motion. If you vote against it, you will be on an official democratic record of the City of Ottawa as a Nazi collaborator. That's all there is to say. Happy to take questions if there are any.
There aren't any. Okay, next delegation is from Miranda Gray. Go ahead whenever you're ready.
Can you hear me, Mr. Mayor?
Yep, go ahead, please.
Hi, everyone. You probably know me, but I'm a resident of Orleans West Innis Ward. I've been on Twitter since 2010, on Blue Sky since 2023, and Mastodon since 2022. I speak in favor of 90% of this motion. It would have been 100%, but I do have some concerns about one of the amendments made this morning. It is time for us to move off Twitter because we are known by the company we keep. Kevin has already addressed most of that, but I will point out that the city revises its communication strategy regularly and does review where it puts its messages. It's time to do that for Twitter. The X of today is not the Twitter of 4 years ago or the Twitter when the city first started using it. The main problems are it is corporate owned and therefore has a corporate strategy. Also, it is US owned and has a US strategy. The owner is a Nazi and is a leader of a government that is not really a Canadian ally at the moment. Other outside organizations have also evaluated X and Twitter as a quantifiable disinformation spreader, and that's not someone we want to be associated with. But the main problem is the algorithm and how it pushes tweets forward to people. It values and devalues what its corporate leadership thinks is important, and that is not something you set. So it is time to go, and you need to go quickly. My main concern with the motion is that it doesn't put any timelines on this. It's not okay to say it's going to take us 2 years to get off here. We need to move faster than that. I understand that our biggest departments will need more time, but don't give them an endless amount of time. Please add some time frame to this motion. So where should you go next? Well, you should go to Blue Sky. It's the most similar to X and Twitter. It's where the people are moving now. There's already a sizable Ottawa committee there. And unlike X or Meta, it's not directly owned by one tech bro. Currently, it's relatively unowned, but we may find that someday we need to move again. This is similar to how the advertising strategy has changed as newspapers have come and gone, as community newspapers have changed their tone. There's no one perfect answer. This is going to happen to us again. TV has changed over our lifetime, and social media will change over our lifetime. But right now, Blue Sky is the right choice for what you are trying to do. For most councillors and departments, you are looking for a place to push messages. You are looking for something that you can add a feed to a web page that gives people snippets of your information to entice them to follow your newsletter or to follow your updates page or to join a specific project. There are better tools out there, but this is the better tool that is similar to what people are using and is where the momentum is. You need to go fast. This can't be something we do half-assed, but it also can't be something that takes 2 years. I would recommend that you follow what other people have done, which is announce that you are doing it, lock your account so people can tell that it is no longer in use. Don't delete it. Set up an autoresponder so that when people send messages to it, they get a message saying, hey, we're not here. You need to go over to this other place. And that you retain it, particularly the City of Ottawa account for emergencies. There will be people that will be slow to move over, and in a dire emergency like a tornado, you need a better system. But what you had in Twitter for the last tornado wasn't very good either. So this is a good time to review how you are using these things, both for emergencies and for regular communications. I would recommend that you go back to your code of conduct, take a look at how you secure names, what properties should be owned by the city and what should be owned by councillors, and some conventions around naming of accounts. There's lots of things you could take opportunities to change while you are making this, but please do it soon. Don't take forever. And the one part of the motion, the revised motion, I would like to speak against is the motion to encourage an Ottawa-based alternative. This is Twitter and social media is a networking issue. The more people connected, the better the communication is. If you make a siloed site as a unique tool, it's not going to have the impact that you will have if you use a shared tool. So my advice is that you move to Blue Sky now, and that you know that someday you may need to move again, but that you get off Twitter as reasonably fast as you can. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. Councillor Brockton, did you have a question for the delegate? Okay, go ahead.
Thank you, Mayor, and thank you, Ms. Gray, for your delegation. I always read and or listen to what you have to say. I have 2 questions for you. The first is, are you aware of any social media platform appropriate for the City of Ottawa's use that is free from inappropriate content?
Sure. So I would, in a different world, I would suggest you be moving to Mastodon right now and that you set up a City of Ottawa Mastodon server where you control what is on there. I use all three of these sites, but I use them for different communities. Right now, Mastodon is where I find my technical people, not where I find residents talking about local issues. I do already see a sizable community of people talking about how to make the city better over on Blue Sky, and people talking about Ottawa issues there. So right now, it would be Blue Sky. It has better blocking tools than Twitter, but it does not have everything you would want in the end. It does have a much easier verification system and a free verification system, which would make it easier for you to confirm whether you were there or not. Something you should do, even if you don't want to participate, you should indicate that you were not there. So we will not see things like the fake Matt Luloff account and issues like that.
Thank you. My other question was just a comment you made about even if we switch to a new platform, which becomes the dominant new social media platform for the city, we may have to change again in a couple of years. I don't really see that as viable or feasible. We can't switch 250,000 people every couple of years because we don't like content that's on there or who owns it. Will you acknowledge that is problematic, or do you believe that that is the reality, that municipalities would have to switch every couple of years if the platform or social media platform we're using just becomes filled with content that people deem inappropriate?
Well, I think this is the problem with changing attitudes towards free speech and hate speech. If we had a global partner, if we had a global realization of what free speech was and what hate speech was, this would be easier to moderate. I don't think it's trivial to change, but I do think federation as a technology will probably resolve this issue in that the city's stuff will move to a Mastodon server where you control what is shared there and what dialogue happens there, but people can see it on whatever tool they choose to use. So I think where you put your stuff might change, but I don't think how people will access it will change. I'm not sure that you've done the studies on whether you get the most bang from your tweets on Twitter or whether you get the most bang from them when you put them on your personal web pages as reference and that people click through to other things. You could be tracking that, but I'm not sure any of you are. The other problem we see is differing policies across the city. So some wards have a ward strategy and some have just a councillor strategy and some have neither. And that's part of a communication problem that we have. I understand why individual councillors have backed away from Twitter. I would hope that new blocking tools in Blue Sky would encourage you to be there. But yes, in the end, I think that Mastodon would be a better tool. It's just not as user-friendly as you need it right now. But I don't think you can wait it out on Twitter. I don't think you want to be associated with what Twitter and X are, particularly Musk as a Nazi, long enough to wait for the tool to get perfect. No tool is ever perfect, but it's not even going to get to like 80% of what you need in the short term. You need to act so that you are not supporting someone who is opposed to Canada being independent, who is opposed to populations that we care about, that attacks people. We need to get off that place, even if there isn't a perfect place to go to.
Thank you. Thank you for your responses.
Okay, thank you very much for the delegation. I'll just note there are 2 written submissions as well. Does anybody want to speak to the motion? Okay, Councillor Luloff.
Sure, I will very briefly, just because I'm a bit disturbed by some things that I've heard today. You know, as a stalwart proponent of intellectual freedom and somebody who believes that it's important to meet people to provide information where they are, I can't support this motion. This is why I vehemently opposed Bill C-18. It has diminished our ability to read news where we are. The Nazi rhetoric here, I believe, is ridiculous. Calling people who don't agree with you a Nazi collaborator is ridiculous, and it debases this place. The delegation has every right to come here and say what he did, and I'll defend his right to do so, but I cannot let it go unchallenged. Calling people Nazis or collaborators in a flippant manner, such as we heard today, diminishes the evil and the reprehensible deeds done by actual Nazis, and shame on people for doing so. I don't use Twitter because it's an unproductive cesspool, but I'm not going to sit here today and dictate who should and should not be using Twitter. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Luloff. Councillor Dudas, I assume you want to go last. All right, Councillor Leeper.
Thank you very much. If you'll bear with me for just a couple minutes, I've prepared a few remarks. Until this job today, one of the best jobs I ever had was at the CRTC's policy shop. And our conversations were right around the time of the creation of internet broadcasting. And what we were focused on was the future of Canadian drama. Now, in 2003, Trina McQueen wrote possibly one of the best summaries of why Canadian television is important. And in a report for the Commission, she said, if you ask a Canadian kid who in the criminal justice system prosecutes the offenders, they would probably answer that it's the district attorney. Canada, of course, has crowned prosecutors, and McQueen's simple hypothesis brought into sharp relief the stakes of mass media. She understood well that cultural imperialism is real and ownership of the platform matters. The reason Americans go so hard in trade negotiations on protecting their creators and platforms' intellectual property, while at the same time seeking maximum access to global markets for both, is because mass media is a strategic component of American economic and cultural hegemony. X and other social networks are the demonstration of the manifestation of Marshall McLuhan's famous maxim that the medium is the message. And every politician in Canada has come to know what that message is: gaslighting, trolling, destabilizing. The messages that have come to characterize X pick apart the bonds that tie people to each other. Those messages are born of a medium that strips communication between people to a simple transaction, and it's designed that way. It leaves us vulnerable, questioning even fundamental truths, and distrustful of each other. By destroying community bonds, the broligarchs are working to reduce us to isolated consumers in the service of their enrichment. Naomi Klein, who wrote the Shock Doctrine, calls it the pollution of our information ecology. Shoshana Zuboff, who many will know as the author of Surveillance Capital, said a few weeks ago of X, our political stability, our ability to know what's true and false, our health, and to some degree our sanity is challenged on a daily basis depending on which decisions Mr. Musk decides to take. Now, the good news is that platforms are networks, and networks depend on users to be effective. Robert Metcalfe's law of networks is often explained with this simple proposition: a fax machine is only as useful as there is another fax machine attached to it. X is only as effective at doing what it does as the number of people who engage with it. X as a medium is designed to destabilize community toward the owner's ends. And by participating in it, the city is feeding it. Residents who turn to X for city messages are being bombarded with gutter content, and that actually diminishes in the long term our ability to share real information with them. They are every day less receptive to receive any communication as trustworthy because that is the platform's goal. It's unconscionable. It's unconscionable that the city continues to engage with it, and it's time we step away from the platform. So I will absolutely be supporting Councillor Dudas's motion. I hope everyone around the table will do the same.
Thank you, Councillor Leeper. Councillor Curry.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Whenever I read anything coming out of the US right now, there's sort of a phrase that people talk about in that there's a mandate to sort of move fast and break things. And it's an interesting thing because it is definitely a business strategy and, fail fast, those kinds of sayings. And the reality is that when you do that, you move fast and break things, you don't really appreciate what the things are that you've broken. And so I look at this and I think, I was off Twitter when it was Twitter like that. It was disgusting 3 years ago. I got off of it. So, but Canada North uses it just for, public, weather advisories or whatever, as a separate handle. So, but I think that there's merit to this motion. The challenge I have is that I don't want us to also move fast and break things. I think one of the benefits of government is that government is known to look at things carefully and what the impact truly would be if our Hydro Ottawa and our police services and our public works didn't have access to a large audience. So I understand there are components of that built in, but I would like to see this motion read more of that staff let us know what the impact would be, how they might go about it, what would some options be. I hear people saying, oh, blue sky, and I'm like, oh, Mastodon. But, I don't think we've really fully thought this through. So I'd like to hear what other people have to say, but I would like to see something to the effect of an amendment that indicated maybe that staff look at this and come back and let us know give us a fulsome view of what the impact would be. That's my general thought.
Thank you, Councillor Curry. Councillor Menard.
Oh, thank you very much, Mayor. Well, a few things. When Twitter first started, the city account began not too long afterwards, and they garnered, to this date, 262,000 followers. There's a lot of followers on Twitter and X. Communication platforms are obviously needed. I myself have used it regularly and have 20,000 followers on there. But a lot has changed since that time. And the concerns that are being legitimately pointed out about that change are being felt by the Supreme Court of Canada, who just got off of X and made a decision to say, look, we're going to keep our old content on there, have it for, I suppose, emergency purposes, but that engaging on that content is going to stop in the future. Charles Akban Marchand also wrote to us. I have a lot of respect for Charles. He does a lot of things for the city of Ottawa. And he talks about the fact that, X requires a login. You can't, not anybody can just see all the feeds. It's not really publicly available information anymore. It used to be, now it's not. And so, there's a real battle going on right now for values in society. And those core values are being challenged, as we're seeing right now in the United States and on our own livability, our quality of life as a result in Canada. And part of that is, the bots, the hateful rhetoric that's being espoused on some platforms. This is certainly one of them. And you can receive a lot of, obviously, negative content and feedback there. Same time, there's a lot of people, I think, regular Ottawans on the platform that do look for information, for news, that sort of thing, but it's declining. I see it every day. It is becoming less and less. Those posts are engaged less. And in terms of the question about, where we go, well, yeah, I've joined Blue Sky too, and I tend to post on both. Facebook's actually been probably the best engager of true actual residents, not bots, where you actually have that back and forth, that dialogue. You can respond to issues and get back to people. And I understand the communications issues with our staff because they're just working to get messages out as much as possible, right? And they're on a bunch of platforms and they want to get that message out there, and they work hard to get people that will follow those accounts and then utilize them in a good way. But I don't think that means we can ignore what's happening around us, the very real concerns since this platform has shifted, and the hate that's being espoused. Or we wouldn't be on other platforms that espouse this type of hate, in my view. But this transition there, it moved from what was, I think, a legitimate tool and a free and open space where accounts were public and threads were public to something completely different in 2022. So I agree with other colleagues. I would like more information from staff between now and council. As it stands right now, I'm going to support the motion that's in front of us. But I want to see more information come forward from that staff perspective in terms of how you transition, the time it might take to transition, and what that looks like between now and council. So thanks to the mover.
Thank you, Councillor Menard. Councillor Gower.
Thanks, Mayor. Are staff available to answer questions? I'm sorry, I'm not in the room, so I wasn't sure.
Yes, they are.
Okay. So I wanted to ask staff. So I left Twitter 2 or 3 years ago because at the time it was going downhill. There were numerous instances of harassment and unreasonable conduct towards myself, my colleagues, other politicians. And I'm just wondering how staff evaluate platforms that we communicate on, whether it's social media, whether it's traditional media, as it relates to our public conduct policy and our code of conduct. Are there any other policies similar to these that staff look at when they're evaluating where the city does official communications?
Thank you. When we do evaluate our channels, we look at first to start the reach, the effectiveness of the channel, as well as the time and resources it takes. And this is any channel, social media or others, including those that we push out. In regards to code of conduct for social media specifically, we do have a social media code of conduct that is on ottawa.ca that basically informs the public the behaviors that are expected when they're interacting with the city, not overall, but when they are interacting with us.
So I guess I'm not a regular user of Twitter, but everything I hear about that platform is that it's a pretty horrible place. And to draw a metaphor, if we had some of the language being used, behavior that's happening in a public forum, that public forum would close down. It would not be an environment where we would continue to interact in. So in staff's view, why is Twitter still an appropriate space for the city to be engaging in?
When we look at our communications, the goal is to reach as many people as possible, particularly for these critical information that we have to get out as a public sector organization to the population. When there are, we do close comments, and not just on X, but on other platforms as well, if we believe that it may create some negative comments. And this is both in consideration of our public as well as consideration of employees. So that does occur on occasion. So we do have the ability to manage that. But overall, just to answer the question again, it's how can we reach the most people for these critical incidents and critical information, and that's how we assess where we are.
Okay, thank you. I've heard a few of my colleagues raise concerns, but on X specifically, it requires a login to fully access information, which other platforms may not. I do think it's important that any information we're sharing be available elsewhere. I think it is, but for the city account. But I think some of the other accounts that other city groups use, Twitter or X may be the only place where they're posting, but can staff just confirm for the city corporate account, is that information being shared elsewhere, or are there circumstances where X is the only platform where specific information is being shared?
No, we do share through various platforms, and we did actually open Blue Sky as well last week. So we started posting on there. So we are currently on Facebook, we are on Instagram, LinkedIn, X as well, but we also ask residents to come to us. So there's information on ottawa.ca. We have e-news subscription, which is actually the best way to get information directly from the city. The information goes out that way. It is also on the Ottawa app. So, and of course, our partners in the media, and when required, advertising. So there is multiple channels.
Okay, thank you. I'll just wrap it up in saying I'm going to support the motion. I don't think it's a perfect motion, and I think there's other issues around our social media strategy and policy that need examining and updating. To me, it's less about who owns the platform than it is that it's become a platform with a lot of unreasonable conduct, a lot of harassment, and any other environment where that would exist, we would not want to participate or be involved in as a corporation, or I would think as individual councillors. Thanks, Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Gower. Councillor Tierney.
Great. Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and thanks for my colleague for introducing the discussion. As a matter of fact, I believe back in the day, we talked about a motion about talking about harassment on Twitter back then. Nothing's really changed. Nothing's changed. The ownership's changed. Jack Dorsey used to own it. He built it. It's been tested. It's been used for a very long time. But we also had other platforms in the past as well, like Friendster, MySpace, ICQ for us older folk in the room. It's always been loaded with trolls. I don't know where magically people think it just happened out of the blue. They've always existed there. It's based on your ability to respond. And I always remind you, councillors, there's nothing forcing you to respond. You can tell people to act like humans and contact us by email, because that's where I do my casework. But I also use all the tools. When it comes to Blue Sky, I have a Blue Sky account. As a matter of fact, I ran around the table. I told everyone, go grab your handles immediately because they're gobbling up quick. I see 6 people I told to go grab their handles so they don't have to be Jeff Leaper 5,000. Why? Because I want to make sure that that new platform is going to be successful. I hope it is. But it also comes with its pitfalls. The exact same trolls have moved from one platform to another, even with their fake names. And even in this month where we're talking about cybersecurity, it's Cybersecurity Month, everybody, by the way. Blue Sky's been hacked off the planet so many times, they actually had a crypto scam going. It's been taken down multiple times. I totally agree with my colleague, Facebook. You actually have a real persona. And why are people afraid of Facebook? Because it could sue people, because there's a persona. You don't have the same level of ability to pursue legally on push platforms like a Blue Sky or on an X, because they come up with fake names. You can't really tie it to anybody. That's why it's lawless. Do I love it? No. But we also have the argument about freedom of speech. We also have the argument about setting the expectations for the communications that we have out there right now. How many times have we heard people say, I'm leaving Twitter for good. I'm going to Mastodon, a federated system, which is garbage that you can't even communicate with. And I have a lot of IT expertise. It was the first ever Liberal Party of Canada webmaster. Yeah, it's out there. So I know what's going on in the background. To run services like this, they got to be battle tested, they got to be simple to use, and they got to be effective in communications. That's what you get with the Jack Dorsey program that was built and acquired by someone we might not like. Do people like Galen Weston? Let's stop purchasing anything from Loblaws immediately. It's a very slippery slope. So anyone that preaches free speech, transparency, I think we're going down a very negative road by doing that. Again, I just want to highlight, Mr. Mayor, with my minute 50, we have lots of opportunities not to be on there. As colleagues, go off. If you don't like it, go off. I don't like half the things. Trust me, more than half have all been unfavorable to me, but I still get 83% at the doors every time. And it's what I keep telling people time and again. It's not real. I use it as a push tool to get instant information out. You can't do that with Facebook. You post something, 2 days later, it might appear on somebody's feed. Twitter is instant. Blue Sky is great. Problem with Blue Sky, character limitations. I represent the bilingual community. I like having the ability to be able to put full text posts using a verified account so I can actually respond with my constituents. I've been doing it well over a couple of years now, so they can get the full English and French. Not that I have to break it up into 50 threads. So there's been a lot of evolution. And if for any instant, the owner decided to start suppressing, started posting hate deliberately to all platforms as a push, I think that would be a different question. I haven't seen that yet. Even our own Canadian government suppressing a lot of news media as well, when it comes to charging about news feeds being available on public sites. So it's very interesting where we've come from, where Twitter was very dominated by one group. Now it's shifted the other way. We're not talking about Pornhub or Truth Social here. That's not where the city's posting. It's posting in the only platform that currently exists. If this was 6 months, a year down the road, maybe something else will be there and X would go the way of Friendster. Anyway, Mr. Mayor, for that reason, I'll be supporting this till there's a future. I won't be supporting this till there's a future tool that is available and everyone else makes their decision to go off.
Thank you, Councillor Tierney. Councillor Brockington.
Thank you, Mayor. Appreciate the discussion we're having today. I think this is an important discussion. I think it's timely. Appreciate the mover bringing it forward. I do have a number of questions for staff to piggyback on an answer I heard, but how does staff decide which social media to subscribe to begin with?
We conduct a social media review where we both look at our current channels and how they're performing, as well as other channels. And when we look at the other channels, as they're constantly changing and constantly growing, we look at the potential reach, so who is currently using it. But we also look at the effort involved in and the resources involved in using that channel. So it's a combination of those two.
And has the City of Ottawa subscribed to a social media platform that we have since left?
Sorry, could you explain the question?
Have we previously used a social media platform that you've decided to leave?
Not that I recall, no.
Okay. Can you confirm we have 262,000 subscribers? Is that the
on
right
the
term?
English? Yes.
Okay. And we first opened our X account what date?
It was approximately 2010, in 2010.
So it's fair to say it took 15 years to get up to 262,000.
Yes.
So if we were to use a different social media platform, how long would it take for the public to transfer over? Would we get 262,000 people to transfer over?
I don't think I can answer that question, Chair, because it is based on the platforms themselves, their popularity, et cetera.
Right. So here's what I'm struggling with. We have a social media platform that is the most popular in the history of the City of Ottawa. Of all platforms we've used, X is the most subscribed, and our ability to get out quickly, that's easy to use, as our staff said, does not require a lot of resources. So the question comes down to, do you want people to make their own decisions in life of which social media platforms to use? The City of Ottawa uses multiple venues. Or do you not like the politics and positions that the owner of X is taking that would move us away from this platform? As some people have argued, we would be complacent or complicit in staying with X. Some people we've heard of label as some pretty egregious terms. I subscribe to 2 newspapers. I pay money to have 2 newspaper subscriptions. And there are many times I disagree with the editorials in those papers. I disagree with articles in those papers. Doesn't mean because I subscribe to the newspaper, I agree with positions editorial writers or commentators write. But I will defend that newspapers or media's right to have variety of thoughts, because that's the society I want to live in. And I don't support a lot of what I see in Twitter either, but I will certainly defend people's rights to become members of Twitter, use it or not use it. And so that's the struggle here today is, do we want to continue to use a medium that 250,000 people use in this city and others? I will acknowledge they're not all residents of Ottawa. I think we do all have concerns with the type of content that is on Twitter. It is completely unacceptable, the type of content that's there. And I think many of us have concerns with the owner and the positions the owner of X takes. But what is our role here? What is our role here? That's what we're debating here today. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Brockington. Councillor King?
Thank you so much, Your Worship. Governments have a responsibility to ensure that our communication channels reflect the core values that guide our work. Since X Corporation's acquisition of the platform, formerly known as Twitter, in 2022, we've witnessed a troubling transformation. Increasingly, it has become a space where racism and misinformation and disinformation flourish unchecked. This platform does not commit to inclusivity, respect, integrity, or responsible communication. And we're not alone in these concerns. Numerous Canadian municipalities have already suspended their accounts on X and redirected their public communications to alternative platforms. These decisions were not made lightly, but rather in recognition that our choice of communication channels reflects our values as a government. The City of Ottawa must maintain clear, accessible, and trustworthy channels of communication with our residents. When a platform's reliability and accountability come into question, we must thoughtfully reassess our presence there. And I think I agree with Councillor Curry's assertion that we should do more work on looking at different platforms because the reality is often social media platforms ultimately start off as information sharing platforms, but they all ultimately can transform into ideological outrage machines. I think we have to acknowledge that the technology contributes to surveillance capitalism, where owners of social media platforms can track user behavior and monetize it. Social media contributes to an attention economy, which favors its users being on a diet of content that creates attention deficit. While X aims to be a global town square, and it attests to be a vital tool for civic engagement, it has increasingly become a space for disinformation, misinformation, which just continues to flourish. But by definition, social media tools themselves have never been aimed fully at inclusivity, respect, integrity, or responsible communication. They are information sharing tools that reflect human bias and are influenced by highly organized actors. The digital landscape has always been environments that have been imbued with risk due to the control exercised by their owners and operators. It'll be important to have resources on these information platforms, and with governments, there's a challenge here that we're confronting because if we do cede this space, there's not going to be a space of trustworthy information. So I think that we do have to have some government reflection as to the direction we're going to take. But I really do feel, based on the way that this platform has been evolving, that this motion actually does propose a measured approach. It's developing a plan to suspend our X accounts while ensuring that residents remain informed through other established and potential new communication channels. And colleagues, this is not about limiting our reach. It's about ensuring that our communications take place in spaces that better reflect our values and serve our residents effectively. And that's why I think it is important for us to review this, to think about what's going on in the environment, because it really will demonstrate that we are taking seriously our responsibility to try to provide information in environments that are respectful and trustworthy. As the digital landscape continues to evolve, so too must our approach to public communication. I think this motion represents a principled step forward, guided by our commitment to responsible governments and meaningful civic engagement. And I know that that's what I'd like to see online. Maybe I'm naive because I don't see it, but when I'm contributing online, we're trying to contribute to meaningful civic engagement. And that's harder to do with platforms such as Twitter. So while I understand the challenge behind ensuring that we have access to a platform to provide information, whether it's about public safety, whether it's about civic engagement, I think that we have to keep in mind that this information environment is too challenged. And that's why I'll be supporting the motion put forward by Councillor Ouest. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor King. Vice Chair Kitts.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I think I join a lot of colleagues in being a bit torn about what's in front of us, with absolutely no disrespect to the mover. I definitely appreciate the intent. I'm not, I have some unease, I guess, with the way this is presented. I think it is more clear in our minds what the risks to staying on the platform are versus what, I guess, potential risks to the organization of coming off the platform. I would have liked to hear, some more detail from OC Transpo, for example, that post, real-time information from traffic, police. So a question to staff is, I guess, how do you interpret the language of the motion where it says create a plan to suspend? Could that be a plan over many months, or do you interpret that as, by the time this committee meets next?
Thank you. With the consideration of our departmental partners who have slightly more complex situations than us, for example, traffic and OC Transpo do use technology that integrates with some other systems to push content out on X. So for them, it would be a little bit more complex in identifying a plan as to what the transition would be technologically, as well as a potential cost. So the preliminary cost combined between the two of them is about $35,000 for that transition. However, that would need to be assessed and validated because that is an initial estimate. So with that consideration, it would likely, for these concrete numbers, it would likely not be before council. It would take a little bit of time.
Okay, so I guess, do you feel you have enough flexibility with the way the motion is written to sort of, come at this pragmatically?
If council chooses to approve this and follow this, we can make a plan to make this happen.
Okay, that helps. Notwithstanding perhaps one of the most egregious examples, I agree with others. I think, these decisions based on sentiment toward particular people is a slippery slope because unfortunately there are a lot of rotten titans of business. But I think pushing our staff to evaluate the ROI of this platform is merited. I made my own cost benefit analysis about whether to engage with X and found it wasn't sort of worth the time, and my account is basically dormant. So asking the question, are we still getting engagement and value? Have the changes to moderation and blocking created a toxic space for our employees that are engaging with this content day in, day out? Are there new technologies that we should be exploring with more intention? And I think perhaps the solution here is not rushing and doing this gradually while we build up more of a following on some of those other technologies. So, I think these are good questions to ask. We have a public engagement strategy update coming forward. Is that correct?
We have reviewed the public engagement strategy. That is correct.
And did that include social media?
No, it does not.
It does not. Okay. Okay. I'm not sure where I'm going with this, so I'll end there. Thank you.
Thank you, Vice Chair Kitts. Councillor Johnson.
Thank you very much, Mr. Mayor. And can I just say that I'm quite delighted with the caliber of debate today. I think it means a lot to be able to engage with my colleagues on quite a profound and existential question about how we relate to our residents and what role technology plays in that. So I appreciate very much being here today. I certainly do support the motion. I don't have a vote today, so I will support it at council. But I support it, based on the nature of the question, which is that we have an external locus of control for our communications with our residents that is creating problems. And we have relegated that authority or those sets of values, aligned ourselves with that set of values with an outside third party. And I think that this is the moment where we should become very reflect very carefully on our Made in Ottawa response to that. And I do think that has to do with our public engagement strategy and what associated investments we need to make, similar to the other departments who are thinking about, their made in Ottawa, made in Canada solutions. What's our made in Ottawa solution to building relationships with residents so that they know all of the different ways that they can reach out to our corporation that don't include the flashiest, sexiest, newest technology model? I mean, I think it is reasonable to assume that we will be confronted with this question over and over again as the corporation persists, because technology advances at a pace that dramatically outstrips government. And so we will be asked to respond to new technological challenges. And we will be asked and confronted with whether or not these technology solutions are right for us. So what are the values that we're showing up for in our public engagement? How do we ensure that residents have their voices heard in other ways so that they don't have to participate in toxic cesspools, as people have described it? I don't want to ask a resident to wade into what they feel is an unsafe, toxic tech environment to be able to have a relationship with the city. I think that's an unfair ask. And in this case, we are confronted with what is basically a very historical moment where this tech community has more influence over data and government than ever before and is brazenly using it. So I do think that it's a pivotal moment for us to examine it and to make the parallel investments in those relationships that are perhaps offline, that are perhaps more frequent, so that we can demonstrate to residents that we have our own set of values when it comes to our relationship with our public. I think that the comparison to journalism is very interesting. Would we suggest that Twitter at this point is a journalistic enterprise? Would we suggest that that is the place where we can get our reliable news? Is that the place where we think that actually people are safely exercising their digital literacy skills? I would suggest not. I would suggest that, in fact, that is the place where you can trust the least and that people feel the most threatened when it comes to their digital literacy. I mean, we know that there's, in engaging with the Jewish community in College Ward, there are young people who are being confronted with Holocaust denialism online. This is traumatic, what they are wading into in our digital spaces. And so why must we suggest that in order to find the City of Ottawa's information, they must confront that? They have to confront that in their schools. They have to confront that in their workplaces. I think that at this point, it is our moral imperative to do better, to think harder. And I would, certainly support the idea of getting the information we need. But I think that to pivot on our technological practices regularly should be expected. And the investments in our other ways of relating with our public and deepening trust that don't involve third-party actors is our only way forward. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Johnson. Councillor Devine.
Thank you, Chair. Like my colleague, Councillor Johnson, thanks for allowing me to speak at this committee. I don't have a vote here either, but I certainly want to weigh on it. And I will definitely be supporting this at Council when I have my vote there. I kind of want to follow on my colleague's, Councillor Johnson's point about the moral imperative, but also speak to the pragmatic imperative here. So thank you very much to Councillor Dudas for bringing this motion. And thanks to staff for the action that you've already taken by opening up a Blue Sky account and having traffic there. I've been talking with staff about this for the past several weeks to begin with. So I won't follow too much on what my colleagues spoke about when it comes to, the questionable practice of continuing to participate in a forum that, that inarguably contributes to a toxic system. But the very fact that, there's an irony here in the fact that we are debating whether or not to continue participating on X, where the owner of it is willfully setting about destabilizing institutions and governments such as our own. So by continuing to participate in X, we are shooting ourselves in both the left and the right foot, and even the foot right in the center. So But rather than talk about those ethical dilemmas, I want to focus on the pragmatic decision we have here. I've heard my colleagues talk about, an obligation to remain committed to this platform, if only for commitment to freedom of speech. We have a responsibility to communicate. We don't have, as the City of Ottawa, a responsibility to any particular tool for communication. We do not have a Mastodon account, but I do not hear people questioning, whether or not we are practicing free speech by not having that account. And as a tool of communication, Twitter is not an effective tool. It has not been for a while. I've heard staff defend Twitter's, our use of Twitter, because of our goal of trying to reach as many people as possible. Yes, we have 262 followers. How many of them are Ottawa people? How many of them are even people? And are we even truly reaching them? And on the issue of it being the most popular site, popular on social media has nothing to do so much with how many followers you have, but what kind of engagement you have with those followers. And so I'm right now I'm looking at our Twitter account, I'm looking at our Blue Sky account, and first of all, the growth that we have had on Blue Sky in the past few weeks has been quite significant. We have gone from several hundred followers to almost 3,000 just in a small amount of time. But when you look at the actual posts, like even right now, yesterday, we put the same post out on X that we put on Blue Sky. And even though on Blue Sky, we have 2.6 thousand followers compared to 262, but we have a greater engagement on Blue Sky. In other words, the audience that we have on Blue Sky is actually listening and engaging, whereas the audience we have on Twitter, they're not engaging with us at all. We're like basically screaming into a room full of people yelling at each other. We're not having any kind of effective engagement at all. And so the only thing I just want to ask ourselves as we debate on this is whether or not it hurts us more to stay on X than to get off. And I truly think it hurts us more to stay on. I don't think we will risk anything great by stepping away from it and finding other platforms where the engagement will be greater. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Devine. I'll just make a few comments before Councillor Dudas wraps up. I appreciate the discussion. I think it's been a very healthy discussion, very good comments, and I think there are very strong arguments on both sides. And I understand what's driving the mover of the motion and the people who support it. I understand the concerns that people who are not so supportive of the motion might have as well. My concern is that if we are, similar to what Councillor Curry raised about exploring this or studying this, looking at the ramifications of it, I would prefer that we were doing something like that. In fact, I would go further to say, in this age of social media, we are probably going to be confronted with this decision frequently, where we might be talking in 6 months about Facebook, or we might be talking about a different social media platform. Maybe Blue Sky gets sold and somebody else buys it, and we're revisiting it again. I think what we heard today is that the criteria that staff use, by and large, is reach. Maybe we need to have a social media policy that articulates what criteria we will use to determine which platforms we will be on, and then use that policy to decide whether we're going to be on X, whether we're going to be on Facebook, whether we're going to be on other platforms, rather than council deciding one platform at a time. I would prefer that scenario. I think we can get into debating how effective it is to be on X or not. I think if we're just discussing it at a practical level, then it's not our decision. It's a staff decision. If we're debating it at a level of principle about where we should be and what criteria we should be using, then it is our decision. And I find this really challenging and complicated because it is unlike anything that we have dealt with before. So when, you can use the metaphor of the public square, you can use the metaphor of traditional media. This, it works to an extent. And Councillor Brockington brought up a number of excellent points about how we may not agree with everything the media writes, or they may not even, always report things accurately, or we might not like editorials in certain environments or commentary from somebody, but we still are likely to participate in that environment. It's a great analogy, and I think it applies to a large extent, but it's not a perfect analogy because social media is something different. At the same time, I'm also struck by the fact that even though, I stopped looking at Twitter almost 3 years ago now, and don't like the platform personally, just because there is negative stuff on Twitter doesn't mean everything on Twitter or X is negative. You can, it is who you're seeing on there. It is who's choosing to participate. There are people who post positive things on X every single day. There are positive discussions that happen on X every day, even if there might also be negative ones. So I think it's tricky and complicated, and I appreciate the discussion that we have had here today. But I think I would prefer to see us developing a policy where we have clear criteria going forward about which platforms we're going to use and which we aren't, rather than council deciding one platform at a time which ones we're going to be on. So I wouldn't rule out supporting a motion like this in the future, depending on how things play out. But for today, I'm not going to support the motion. Councillor Dudas.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I can't think of a better day than today for us to be discussing whether or not Ottawa stays on X and whether we should be suspending our accounts. As Trump's tariffs aim to sucker punch our economy, as rhetoric from the US becomes increasingly alarming, now is the perfect time to decide what role we, as the nation's capital, can play in demonstrating Canadian unity and strength. In the weeks since I first floated this motion, we've seen in multiple groups and organizations also leaving X. The Supreme Court of Canada, Le Collège de Médecins de Québec, the City of Cambridge has left, the City of North Vancouver. Prior to that, the City of Paris also suspended its account. So if we decide to leave X, we're in good company. Aside from the talk about tariffs, the concern about X has been percolating for a very long time. There's been concerns about how user data has been collected and disseminated, as well as the validity of the information that's being shared. It begs the question, is this a place that the City of Ottawa should be posting its information on? I want to thank City staff. This has not been an easy motion for them, particularly Andrea and her team. As somebody mentioned, this is not the perfect motion, nor did I expect it to be. A lot of the changes that I've made have been done because of the conversations I have had with staff. It takes into account the need for maybe crisis or emergency communications and making sure that we can disseminate information in a timely and extensive fashion. The mention about suspending our platform, having a plan, does buy staff leniency. It gives them time to work that in. I quite adamantly did not put a timeline in so that we could ease ourselves out of this platform. I think Councillor Curry put it quite nicely. I didn't want to break anything as we move quickly. That's not my intent. My intent is to spark a conversation, and I think we had that today, and I'm really appreciative to my colleagues for that opportunity. I also quickly wanted to explain that last little paragraph, or would therefore it be resolved, that I added in there. As I was contemplating this motion, and, once again, we've talked about Mastodon and Blue Sky, and there's all these other platforms. Staff had mentioned there's no perfect solution right now. There's nothing that quite performs the way X does in terms of disseminating information. So I wanted to challenge our community. We've talked many, many times, Councillor Curry, about what an incredible tech sector we have. We have such an intelligent population. I wanted to put out there that if there is a made in Ottawa solution, we should look at that. We should contemplate that as consideration. And in the, 2.5 weeks since this first came up, I've had 4 different groups reach out to me. Viable options that I'm going to be sharing with city staff. Doesn't mean that it's going to be the solution we're looking for, but it does mean that there's innovation out there. I see this as an opportunity for not only our city to take a stand, show unity with the rest of Canada, join some other very viable jurisdictions who have taken this approach already, but also to look at something that might be perfect for our citizens and promote a more, apt decorum for how we share our information. So I ask for your support of my motion today, and I do respect everyone's opinion on this, and I really appreciated the discussion.
Thank you, Councillor Dudas. Let's have a vote, a recorded vote then, please, on the motion.
Councillor Luloff.
No.
Councillor Dudas.
Yes.
Councillor Curry.
No.
Councillor Gower.
Yes.
Councillor Tierney.
No.
Councillor King.
Yes.
Councillor Leeper.
Yes.
Councillor Brockington.
No.
Councillor Menard.
Yes.
Councillor Brown.
No.
Vice Chair Kitts.
No.
Mayor Sutcliffe.
No.
5 yeas, 7 nays.
Okay, thank you, everyone. Thanks again for very good discussion. Moving to item 10.2, which is a motion from Councillor Menard on accessibility review at the Lansdowne site. We do have a delegation, and I know there is a motion to defer, but let's hear from the delegation first and then have some discussion around that.
Mayor, may I just read in the therefore be it resolves before
the original motion? Sure.
The original motion. If we can get it up just on the screen, that would be great. So I can just explain what it's doing. Actually, I'll just read the therefore be it resolves in now. Oh, there, perfect. Okay, so it's there are two therefore be it resolves. They're both different. The first is therefore be it resolved that should the Lansdowne 2.0 proposal for the event center and Northside stands proposed under Lansdowne 2.0 not be approved by City Council, that staff in consultation with the Accessibility Advisory Committee and the broader disability community be directed to report to City Council with an accessibility review of the existing facilities, including options and estimated costs for mediating barriers for people with disabilities. And B, be it further resolved that staff be directed to undertake an accessibility review of the Lansdowne site beyond existing or proposed facilities, including but not limited to accessible transportation and points of access to the site, accessibility of the grounds of the site, and dedicated accessible on-site parking capacity. And Mayor, this is in relation to the no-go Q4 decision that we have stated to the public. So it seeks two different aspects. One is if Lansdowne goes forward or not, the first clause, and the second clause has nothing to do with Lansdowne 2.0. It says that no matter what happens, we need an accessibility review of the grounds at Lansdowne outside of the gated ticket access points, i.e. the public areas, for things like accessible parking spaces, access to on Bank Street, the designated Winnerf, the curb cuts, transit, bike and wheelchair rolling access, and measures for the blind who, with organizations like CIB, who have commercial space at Lansdowne. So there are two separate clauses here. I just wanted to make sure to introduce the motion again, Mayor, before the delegation. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Menard. Mr. Fiore, go ahead anytime. Thank you.
Okay, thank you for having me here. I'm chair of the Ottawa Disability Coalition, and the members in there represent about 30% of the population of the city of Ottawa, and we're very concerned with accessibility. And that the coalition got together and discussed priorities by going through what we call an affinity tree process. It came up with the priorities for persons with disabilities in the city. And basically, the highest priority was community support services, followed by housing and affordable, accessible housing. And at the third priority was financial support, employment, and education, everything that people with disabilities need to live a quality life. The fourth one was actually barrier-free type of access to all these places. And the fifth one was actually transportation, transit to those locations and stuff like that. So the highest priority is basically community support services and housing. And that, so we fundamentally oppose the notion overall of going ahead with Lansdowne 2.0 on that basis that it is going in the wrong direction. It's not putting funds into what persons with disabilities really need. And that, but more to the point of the motions, in that it explains why we really have to put a lot of effort into understanding persons with disabilities. So it's not good enough to just put, proper accessibility seating in the stands. It's not good enough to just have washrooms there. In that, if you can't get there, it's a moot point to having accessibility there. In that, so we have to make sure that we're putting our priorities into making sure we can actually get there in the first place. In that, and Bank Street is one of the worst locations for accessibility across the board in the city. In that it's so crowded. There's no parking around in the communities. There's not enough parking anywhere, and access is really, really poor. We have a very poor system of accessible taxis. We don't have very much of that available. We do not have very good paratransport service, in the sense that to go to one of these hockey games or football games, there's just not enough access there to get there. So there's so many different issues, and I outlined that in the written submission that I have sent in. So I don't think I have to go through all of the details of all of that, but I'll just ask you a question. If you're worried about having accessible washrooms at the stadium or at the rink, think about how people are worried about having accessible washrooms in their own home, having free mobility in their own home, and again, the priorities really have to be on what is the impact on the actual persons with disabilities, and that to go to a football game, a hockey game is very important for some people, but it's not urgent. What is urgent is accessible housing, accessible everything else in the city. So I really want to support the motions of making sure that we can get there to, through the transit and all of the studies necessary, regardless of whether you actually approve Lansdowne 2 or not. But I really strongly encourage all council to really consider not approving it and putting that money into what is really, really important and urgent for the people of the city. And I'll go on and mention a couple of things. My colleague... You have about 10 seconds left, sir. Okay, sorry. Well, then go ahead and...
okay. I believe Councillor Menard has a question for you, I believe.
Yeah, thank you very much, Jerry, for your delegation and for your comments here today. The city owns more than 1,000 buildings, 570 of which are public-facing buildings that serve our community. In January 2023, an accessibility audit was conducted for those buildings, and the total cost estimate to remove barriers at these facilities combined was about $160 million, so about a third of the cost of Lansdowne 2.0. We've heard complaints about paratranspo and accessible taxi wait times being exacerbated by an already bad situation at Lansdowne on Bank Street, as you've mentioned. I'm wondering, have you heard similar experiences? And can you think of ways that we could improve accessibility across the city, both on the site and across the city, without the other bad aspects that are being lumped in with Lansdowne 2.0?
Well, yes, there's two projects underway in the city right now, which is the Tunney's Pasture Master Planning process, which is going to develop a complete community, around a transit hub, a complete 15-minute community there. And there's another process on Confederation Heights master planning process that is underway, which is going to develop a tremendous amount of new affordable public housing, and very accessible areas and stuff like that. So, and I sit on the Confederation Heights Master Plan, and Giselle Doyle sits on the planning for the Tunney's Pasture and that. And so I really encourage all new development to really move that way, and to worry less about trying to retrofit some of the buildings that are here. And that, so the priority really has to go on new things, and new housing, new accessible housing, and all of that. I don't feel that I think the city has already concentrated on making most of the front-facing buildings accessible washrooms and accessible curb cuts and all of that, and I think they've done a wonderful job on that. But there is a limit on, you're going to get to some point where it's just not worthwhile doing accessibility renovations to some of these older buildings. And that, so I really think the approach of putting it into the new build is more important than some of the 160 million ones that are still identified.
Thanks. Thank you for that, Jerry. The other point I just wanted to get you to comment on is around, we had a motion to have some non-market affordable housing included as part of any residential development, and a motion that asked for the surface parking spots at Lansdowne to become accessible parking spots. Both of those were unfortunately voted down by council. I just wonder your take on that.
Well, accessible parking is a real problem for sure. And now I know the city is undergoing a review of a pilot study on trying to improve accessible parking in the city. And I strongly suggest that it is at Lansdowne Park, if you're going to have 18,000 people going there, persons with disability represents 25% of the population, that you really need an awful lot of accessible parking spots. Now, how many of that 25% are mobility? I can't answer in that, but it is a high percentage in that. So you really need a much larger percentage of accessible parking, and or much better accessible transit, paratranspo in particular, or taxis to bring people there, pick them up and bring them back.
Thank you, Jerry. Thanks, Mayor.
Thank you, Mr. Fiore. Thanks for the work you're doing with the Disability Coalition. Appreciate you being here today. Maybe just for clarity though, could I ask staff to sort of describe the accessibility work that is being done within the Lansdowne plan that we're going to see later this year?
Yes, Mr. Mayor. City staff, the project team are working with an accessibility consultant, and that consultant is embedded with the project architect. So doing work both on the inside of the two city facilities, as well as all the public realm improvements that we're working on through the project. And the city project team's working with the accessibility office on improvements overall of Lansdowne, and has been working with the CNIB on observations and walkabouts about what improvements are required for Lansdowne as a whole.
Okay, thank you. Vice Chair Kitts, I believe you have a motion to defer this decision.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'll read it in and then I have a couple of comments. So whereas City Council is expected to consider the next steps in the Lansdowne 2.0 project, including the public realm improvement plan and event center and Northside stands by the end of 2025. And whereas it is appropriate to refer Councillor Menard's motion to be considered in the context of that discussion, therefore be it resolved that the motion from Councillor Menard on an accessibility review at the Lansdowne site be deferred for consideration at the meeting of the Finance and Corporate Services Committee, where the Lansdowne 2.0 project will be considered, expected in Q4 2025. So I think the motion, the first therefore be it resolved is really hypothetical. Should the Lansdowne 2.0 proposal not be approved by City Council, I think, it's more appropriate to make a decision at that time about next steps. I absolutely do think a review of accessibility is needed, and creating a new facility affords us the ability to do better. I understand from staff that that review work is already taking place in response to your question, Mr. Mayor. So that will be part of the report that will be considered in the fall. Thank you.
Thank you, Vice Chair Kitts. So we're now debating the deferral motion, and then we'll vote on the deferral motion. And if it passes, that'll be the end of it. If it is defeated, then we will debate and vote on the original motion. Councillor Menard?
Yeah, thank you very much, Mayor. Obviously, there's a lot going on in the Lansdowne 2.0 plan. One of the good things that I've heard about the current proposal is the meaningful accessibility upgrades. We need that. That site deserves it, and people deserve it. But at the same time that's happening, we're privatizing a portion of our public park to real estate developers to build unaffordable housing. We're moving our arena and eliminating 58,000 square feet of accessible green space in the process. We're moving ahead with a vision for Lansdowne renewal that was put forward by the private sector instead of a public vision. So there are many reasons to oppose the Lansdowne 2.0 proposal, and I don't want our commitment to accessibility to live and die with a real estate deal and a costly, short-sighted, unpopular plan. The motion is asking for council to commit to accessibility at Lansdowne, regardless of what comes next. That includes the gated access buildings and on the grounds. So I don't want to hold that commitment hostage with this plan filled with other concerns that legitimately have been raised by the public. That's the reason why the motion came forward and why I hope that we could debate it or discuss it now and vote for this regardless of what happens. I don't see a need for deferral in that way, but I do understand Councillor Kitts has made a good point that the first portion is contingent on 2.0 going forward or not, but the second is not. It is about other aspects of the Lansdowne grounds, things like on-site accessible parking, the access to Bank Street, the QED portion, and the accessibility portions of that, the designed WNRF concept, the curb cuts, the transit, the bike and wheelchair rolling access, as well as the residents' stories that I'm hearing about paratransport waiting for hours there. And so I guess I would ask the mover to please split the two options so that we can vote on the deferral of both separately. It's the same motion essentially, but we would just have two votes. So on the two different be resolve clauses, A, which is the Civic Center and the Northside stands, and then B, which is the rest of the grounds of Lansdowne. To me, that would make a lot of sense, Mayor, and I'm hoping the mover can move that in its stead so that we can at least have two votes on it. You can vote the same if you want, but at least we'd have two votes based on the difference of the two be it resolved portions. So I'd hopefully ask if that's friendly, I guess, to move them separately.
Okay, so the two therefore be resolved would be moved separately. I guess a question to staff is what Councillor Menard's asking above and beyond what's already being done, and I guess is there a staff opinion on if that's feasible?
Mr. Mayor, I can tell you what we are doing, and maybe that helps inform the discussion. So through, as you recall, in 2023, there is over 20 motions for our project team to look at. Some of those are PXO crossings across the QED. Of course, those will be looked at from an accessibility lens. And as I mentioned earlier, we'll also be carrying forward in the final report in Q4 2025, a series of improvements that will be needed for the rest of Lansdowne knowing that we've, working with the CNIB and the Ottawa Accessibility Office, other improvements around Marche Way and Exhibition Way and different integration points to Lansdowne that we will be reporting on in terms of what's needed in the next steps of Lansdowne.
Yeah, okay. So I don't know if I still have the floor, but that's all well and good. And I appreciate a lot of those were my motions and I appreciate those portions. There is a lot left to be desired, Mayor. And that's why the second part of the motion is about the rest of the grounds and a full accessibility audit for the entire grounds, not just the access point. So I'm hoping if it's okay to just have those moved separately, you can still again vote how you want to, but at least we'll have two separate votes on it. The second one would ensure the work that we're talking about has a full accessibility audit of the grounds of the site, not just the gated Civic Center and stands. So I'll just make that plea that we can have them separate.
I'm okay to have two votes.
Okay. Thank you very much, Mayor.
Okay, thank you, Vice Chair Kitts. Thank you, Councillor Menard. Councillor Leeper.
Thanks. On deferral, I think I have been listening fairly carefully, but I am still uncertain as to whether or not, say, Councillor Menard and staff are at an impasse with respect to what other work would need to be done, regardless of whether Lansdowne 2.0 moves ahead or not. I think I'm hearing staff make an assertion that whether Lansdowne 2.0 moves ahead or not, all of the subject matter that would be covered by the second portion of the resolution is going to be done. Is that accurate?
Mr. Mayor, that's our goal, is to report back. And I think in addition to that, I'll also refer you to the City of Ottawa's Municipal Accessibility Plan that has a separate plan and funding for accessibility improvements outside of in terms of other capital projects, such as I think Bank Street was mentioned. So that's a separate plan as well that the city has funding for outside of the Lansdowne. But in terms of internal, correct, we'd be looking to report back to council on, give council an update on all the accessibility upgrades outside of the work that we're doing on the two site plans and the two facilities.
Okay. Okay. Thank you. I think that gives me a little bit more clarity. I think the formality of the second, be it resolved in terms of making sure that that work gets done, is well worth doing. So on deferral, I'll be supporting the first deferral on the first clause, but the second one I won't be I won't be supporting deferral because I'd like to get that in place today. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Leeper. Councillor Curry.
Thanks, Mr. Mayor. On deferral here, why on March the 4th are we talking about this? Like, what is it? Why are we doing this with this now? I don't understand this. Hence the deferral. Like, when we're going to vote on Lansdowne in Q4, and then if it doesn't pass, then we'll deal with these things. And it seems like there's a whole bunch of other motions. I can't remember them all. There were so many of them, but sort of touch on all of this. Maybe they need to be consolidated if you felt that there was another motion still necessary. I think we should defer the whole thing and then sort it out after Lansdowne passes or doesn't pass.
I can respond to that, Mayor. Just because it's a question based on the motion. The first point, I hear what you're saying, and that is the case. That's a go no go decision, and that will go ostensibly to October. On the second point, what we're saying is that there is more work to be done in advance of that decision in October or Q4, whenever that comes forward, on the grounds of the site that are not being done right now, and it would ensure an accessible audit comes as part of that work and report back formally in that Q4 decision for the second portion of this. So totally agree on the first point. It's the second one that needs some more work and formalization of staff report back as part of that Lansdowne work.
Okay, thank you for that clarification. So the second one, it actually would inform our decision in Q4. So, but what I am hearing though, and I don't know if deferral then it matters, but staff is already going to do this. It's sort of one of these redundant motions, which, we do a lot of these things, just so people know that these things are taking place, but is this not, just to have staff respond one more time, what you are already doing and going to report back on before we get to the Lansdowne motion?
Mr. Mayor, just for clarification, we're not doing a formal accessibility audit on all of Lansdowne, but we are working with the Accessibility Office, who's working with the CNIB, and we have our accessibility consultant. So we are bringing forward what could be moved forward in the future on all these components of accessibility outside of our project on Lansdowne.
Okay, so Mr. Mayor, just to be clear, so it's not, doesn't say an accessibility audit, it says review. Are you thinking that's the same thing? And if so, if this is actually indeed something different from what has been asked, is there a cost to this different from what you're already doing then?
Mr. Mayor, if we were asked to do a formal audit, there would be a cost outside, but we have a handle on upgrades and needs now through those aforementioned through our accessibility consultant and through working with the accessibility office. So,
Mr. Mayor, still on deferral, like really though, should we not defer until we find out how much this costs? I guess I'm just not clear if this is actually asking you to do something significant before we get to the vote, that we don't really realize that this is actually a significant undertaking different from what you've already been directed to by motion.
In other words, if I may, Councillor Curry, in other words, if this second be it further resolved clause were to be carried today, not deferred and then carried, what would the implications of that be for staff? Would it be additional work? Would it be additional cost? Beyond what you were already going to do?
I think, Mr. Mayor, reading the second motion, it would be, we wouldn't be doing anything differently. We'd be reporting back on the accessibility review that we're undertaking with our accessibility consultant and the accessibility office.
So it's asking you to do something you're already going to do effectively.
That's my interpretation, Mr. Mayor.
Okay.
Okay, so we're back to this kind of already being done. But, maybe you like to tell the community that it's being done so that it's clear. I don't know. I'm sort of two minds of these things when they come up, because I think, if people aren't aware that they're being done, maybe this is helpful. If it's already being done, fair enough, as long as it's not something significant that it was adding additional costs, but defer the first part for sure. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Curry. Councillor Menard, if you'd like to wrap up in a second, but I'll just say a couple things first, really quick. I think I'd like to wait on the first one to make sure we have a decision on Lansdowne 2.0 before we undertake any further action. On the second one, I think we've confirmed here today that staff are going to do this anyway, so I don't see the need to reaffirm that with a vote. So I'll be voting to defer both of them. If in October or November we discover that not enough work has been done, we can ask staff to do more work at that time. So I'll be voting to defer on both. Did you want to say something?
Sure. I wasn't going to, but just on the second point, because I thought that's probably just a slam dunk. But I guess the issue is the transportation issues to and from the site are a concern. The delegation raised it. There has been nothing formal around the accessible nature of that transportation to and from the site, except for the motion that Sean Moore correctly pointed out, which is the QED access. We do have other work going on for Bank Street redesign in that area, but again, it's a separate study. There's also separate accessibility work happening, not related directly to Lansdowne 2.0, but on the site. The issue is, Mayor, there's been nothing formal said about the accessible transportation points and accessibility on the grounds themselves, outside of the gated access. And this is what this is getting at, though. So yes, there may be some actions happening in different areas on this, but in terms of a formal discussion about that transportation to and from the site, that access for transportation, this is pretty critical. And I want to make sure that we have said there's a go, no-go decision in October or Q4. If it is a no-go, this type of work still has to take place on the grounds, right? And so it's formalizing that. And that's what the motion speaks to. And I think appreciate staff comment back on it. Hopefully we can vote in favor of that second portion in any event. Thank you, Mayor.
Okay, thank you. So a vote then on the first, therefore it be resolved, on deferral of the first, therefore it be resolved.
Councillor Luloff.
Yes.
Oh, okay. I think is everybody okay just to carry that one? Okay, carried. So just voting on the second one then. On voting for deferral of the second, therefore be it resolved, just for clarity. If you say yes, you're voting for deferral. If you say no, you're voting to deal with it today.
Councillor Luloff.
Yes.
Councillor Dudas,
Yes.
Councillor Curry,
Yes.
Councillor Gower,
Yes.
Councillor Tierney,
Yes.
Councillor King,
No.
Councillor Leeper,
No?
Councillor Brockington,
No.
Councillor Menard,
No.
Councillor Brown,
Yes.
Vice Chair Kitts,
Yes.
Mayor Sutcliffe,
Yes.
8 yeas, 4 nays.
Okay, thank you. Notice is a motion for consideration at a subsequent meeting. Councillor Gower?
Thank you, Mayor. Just going to call it up here. It's quite a technical motion, so perhaps I'll just read the therefore be it resolved. Therefore be it resolved that the disposal of real property policy be waived to enable the city to transfer a 4.52 meter wide portion of block 129 plan 4M 1616 back to the owner for nominal charge. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Gower. Are there any other notices of motion? Any inquiries? Any other business? Motion to adjourn? Carried. Thank you, everyone. Merci beaucoup.